This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, thanks so much for joining me. I've got a killer conversation with a fellow Aussie to share with you. It's Tana Douglas. She is the world's first female roadie. She was there at the very beginning as bands started getting out of the clubs and into arenas and eventually stadiums. I read her book recently. It's called Loud, A Life in Rock and Roll by the world's first female roadie. It is outstanding. I'll put a link in the bio so you can check it out yourself. A bit of background, she spent time on the road with Deep Purple, ELO, Elton John, Lenny Kravitz, Pearl Jam, Ozzy Osbourne, and she was there at the very beginning as AC/DC started their journey to becoming the world's biggest rock and roll band. All right, so here she is, the great Tana Douglas.
Hello, how are you?
Great to hear your Australian accent, even though you've been in Los Angeles probably more years than you care to remember.
Afraid so. Guilty.
How do you, I know you're a global citizen, I get that. I've read the book and I love the book, by the way, and plenty of questions about that. But
Thank you.
how do you find it? Did it take you a long time to adjust to I'm talking about the day-to-day of Los Angeles compared to Brisbane?
Well, I left Brisbane when I was a kid, you know what I mean? So Australia, I left when I was 17, lived in England for 8 years.
Yeah.
Europe for a couple of years, the States, and then back to Europe, back to Australia, you know. So, I mean, it does actually work out that I've spent more time, if you add it all up, in the United States than any other country. So it is an adjustment. It's definitely an adjustment. When I first got transferred, because I got transferred from the UK, I was based in London at the time, and the production company in London wanted me to come over and work for the LA office that was just opening up, or had just opened up recently. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't brand new, but it was expanding. And it was quite a shock, actually. It's, you know, I mean, I knew there was a big difference touring with, like, from having toured with American bands and English bands. I got there was a big difference, but when I moved to America, it was quite a shock. You know, everything was definitely bigger, louder, faster. You know, so it was quite a thing. And now it's going through another radical change. You know, which is unfortunate, but the rest of the world's going through it as well. But you know, everyone seems to have crazy politicians at the moment. So the world's gone mad. So I don't know what I'd gain from leaving here and going somewhere else. You know, it all seems to be a rat race at the moment.
Look, I've done this podcast now for 7 or 8 years, or 7 years, sorry, I should say, into the 8th year, but 7 full years. And I got to say, like, these days, I'm not saying you can't tell the difference, but it's very flat these days. In the Western Hemisphere, you could be talking to someone from Australia, Canada, the United States, the UK, and we're basically experiencing the same pressures and the same issues, whether it's inflation, hyperinflation, the same sort of issues that are going on within community and the like. It's not like it was, say, even 20 years ago, where you could go to. I went to Los Angeles 20 years ago and it was just overwhelming.
I think there's going to be a huge shift in world power, and I think this is just the throes of it.
I think you're spot on, Tom. I think you've made a very astute observation there. And yeah, we're seeing, you know, all this from the river to the sea bullshit that we're seeing at the moment carry on with I'm not sure where people are getting their North Star. It seems to be skewed obviously to the left at the moment, but there's this idea that words are violence, but actual violence is resistance. You know, I just can't understand. I mean, I can understand how we've got here, but you know, that part of myself that's very much for the human race is very despondent at the moment over that.
Yeah, it's a sickening place to be, I think. Sickening place to be. I mean, there's no logic to it. And people are just being hand-fed bullshit and swallowing it. They're just saying, more, please. Can I have some more? It's like, what's going on?
Do you remember when we were? I'm 45, okay, so I don't think we're, you know, obviously a few years older than me, but I think we're a similar generation. Okay, I remember the 80s is what I'm saying. Certainly, right. 78. But do you remember you used to be able to have a group of mates, or some were fairly right wing, some were fairly left wing, but you could always have a beer. And you could always
Oh, yeah.
share stories. And I'm fairly right wing, to be honest with you. And just about all of the bands that I've ever been in, if you share political perspectives, they're almost all left wing. But I still accept it. And I still accept them, is my point. But I feel like that's gone. But my question around that is, do you think that's a generational thing, or do you think that's just the way time moves and evolves?
I think there's been so many changes and there's been so many polarizing things that have happened, and we're told they're polarizing. Like it's fed to us that if we don't agree with this, there's something wrong with us. You know, and nobody wants to be the odd person out, But I mean, like America's completely polarized 50-50. Mm-hmm. This next election's just going to be hideous. It's going to be totally hideous. There's an idiot running and there's a crazy person running. So I don't know, I mean, one's more dangerous than the other, but, what's the other difference? I don't know. I don't know. It's, I mean, it's because we've been fed this for so long and people have learned to not resist. They don't resist anymore. It's just, it's like what I find disgusting is when people stand by and watch someone be attacked or something, whether it's verbally or physically. It's like, what are you doing? You're filming on your cameras. Stop it. What is going on? I mean, there's no empathy anymore, no empathy for the other person. There's only an empathy for me, what I want. And if the person standing next to me happens to prop that up, then that's okay. They can stand next to me. If they don't, then there's absolutely no room for them. There's no conversation. Like you say, you used to be able to have a joke and you would make a joke of someone, if they were like incredibly liberal or something and everyone else wasn't, you'd be like, oh God, here he comes, You'd have a joke about it and then move straight on and continue talking. It'd be like, it'd be a little bit of a wind up and that's it, but now that's fighting words, and violent fighting words. I mean, America's never had a war on its home turf, but it's about to have, if it doesn't have an international one, it's going to have a civil one. So either way, it's coming, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but I just don't see any other way around it.
You're there. You can check the temperature better than anybody in Australia about what's going on in the United States. But that's certainly the perspective I'm forming, and a lot of the musicians that I'm talking to, a lot of the conversations that I have about these topics don't actually make the podcast. But we're all scared of the same things. What we talked about. Okay. Yeah. It's that ability to just get along. And the absence of common sense. And what is it then replaced with? And I've got to share my opinion on the whole thing. And it's not that I walk around Bible bashing, but I'm still Christian. I'm still Catholic. Right. And it's an absence of God in people's lives. And I'm not saying you have to go to mass or church every Sunday, but it's that whole idea that there's something bigger than you beyond that you can therefore have faith in when times are tough. They seem to think, especially these young lefty types, that they've got the answer to bloody everything. And it's through intersectional politics and identity politics. And this pathway that they're going down, when you look at history and you look at how identity politics has been applied through communism, go back to China, Stalinist Russia, it ends in murder, just mass fucking murder, excuse my language. But I just can't understand why these people are advocating for these outcomes, knowing that history has already taught us that it ends in the demonization of people and effectively, and it's a death cult.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with religion, though, is religion stopped being religion and it became something else. It became this commercial machine, and if you don't give your money to us, you're not a worthy person. I mean, that to me was the end of religion in my mind, once it became a commercial entity. I mean, to me, religion doesn't have any empathy either. There's zero empathy in religion. If you're not of that grain that they are, then there's no room for you. I mean, you can see that right now. It's going on in the Middle East, Well,
certainly with Islam, with no question.
Yeah, but it's with all religions. It's all religions. There is no middle ground. No one's prepared to give. And now the general public's acting the same way. Did they learn that in church? I don't know. I don't go to church, but I think religion. I'm not saying religion. Well, a lot of people would say religion caused it all. But the problems that we're having right now, I think a lot of it can be traced back to different religion behavior. I mean, it's behavior. You've got these, whether it's Bill Graham or whether it's, that other guy or, or that woman, they're big television show stars. They've got these huge mega cathedrals. They're flying private jets. They're getting caught having affairs with people. They're getting caught this and that. I mean, it's ludicrous, and it's like, and that's meant to be your solace? I don't think so. And then others are just plain outright killing each other. And it's like...
Yeah, no, it's an interesting perspective. So I actually work for the Uniting Church. The Uniting Church in Australia. I'm a journalist and content creator for the Uniting Church these days. And believe me, as I said, I'm clearly into heavy metal. I grew up listening to satanic music, the whole thing. But I never lost my North Star about Jesus and God, you see. That was always the difference between me and many others, But I guess the point in and amongst all of that is I find that I'm one of the only people in the organisation that I think has more of a traditional view of Christianity. A lot of it is now woke. A lot of it is now got the flags and stuff within buildings. And I say, well, look, this is all social justice, and that's all well and good, okay. But the church actually needs to be about faith, because people are doing it tough and they need to understand that let's disconnect from the organised aspect of it. It's not even about coming into church, but you can plug into the message, whether it's the Bible or, and as I say, I'm really careful not to be a Bible basher because I'm not that at all. I'm simply saying that life is long, life is tough. There are myriad of ways you can connect to God, whether it be through Krishna consciousness, Hinduism, even Buddhism, which I know is more of an absence of not so much faith, but it's an absence of thinking, and therefore it's a bit of a void. But there are all these ways that you can step outside of yourself. And I guess I make the point about me working for the church is that I try to maintain that aspect of faith and plugging into faith. And I see a lot of the stuff I see around me, particularly coming from Assembly in Sydney, is extremely woke, which to me is sort of the antithesis of what the faith is all about.
Well, I mean, to me, if there's, faith should be held as strong as giving. And that's the bit that's missing. No one's giving anymore. Everyone's just taking, So to me, a religion's no good if it's solely faith-based. It should be about giving. It should be about getting out into the community. It should be about helping people. It shouldn't be about flying around in private jets. It shouldn't be about having mega million mansions. It shouldn't be about all these tax breaks and collecting properties and lands and artifacts and all that stuff. I mean, it's just lost its whole point in my mind, because there is no longer any giving.
Yeah, I hear you. Let me ask you a question, though, about your career. Let's switch gears and talk about
I was going to say, but meanwhile...
Yeah, well, it's always good to have a multifaceted conversation, I believe, because I genuinely mean this. I have an intelligent audience. They're people like you and I, well-travelled. A lot of them they work in finance. They've got families, this sort of thing. I know that because people communicate with me. And I'm not saying that alone makes them specifically intelligent, but the way in which you articulate, the way that they've enjoyed the show allows me to draw a pretty solid conclusion that these are smart people. But I'm going to, talk up your book. Hang
on to them.
I will. And the lovely thing is, Tana, like you probably find, they're all across the world, from Iceland to Poland to the United States. A little bit here in Australia. No, it's a bit disappointing. I have bugger all Australian audience, but I try and grow it. But after reading your book, and I really want people to read the book, so I'm not going to talk about too many specific things about the book. I'm more going to take some questions that are inspired by what I read in the book. But my first question for you is, would you do it all over again?
All of it?
Why not? Yeah, let's go for it.
Why not? Let's go for it. Well, a lot of it I didn't have a choice with, to be honest. A lot of the early on stuff I didn't have any choice or any say in. So, but, that early on stuff in my childhood sort of prepared me for the life on the road. I mean, I was traveling constantly, moving from town to town, doing all that sort of stuff, getting uprooted, never really knowing where I was going to be next and all that sort of stuff as a child. So, one of the hardest things that people find when they start working in this industry is they can't stand the lack of, home base. They miss it, they need their family, they need their significant others and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't have any of that, or I felt I never had any of that growing up. So I had nothing to miss. Instead, what I'd inherited is, a group of people that were like-minded, and we all got along. And the ones that didn't, I mean, obviously there's ones that don't, but it was like any demograph. There's always someone who doesn't fit in, or someone that everyone's going to sort of wind up a little bit, or some people that don't go the distance, and so they get replaced. But it's a unique environment, and because you're so close and you're thrust in together, and you really are living in each other's pockets, then, you just build these incredible bonds and friendships that last your entire life.
Do you still keep in touch with a lot of the bands, a lot of the people that you connected with, those people that you wrote about in the book?
Yeah, I keep in touch with certain people. I've always sort of tried to keep a bit of a low key in a way. I wouldn't hang out in dressing rooms often, I mean, I'd get invited to people's homes, like spent a Christmas with Elton one time, and, you go to someone else's place for birthdays, or, got invited back to someone else's house on the Isle of Man, and we spent a weekend there with the TT races going on. So you build those sort of relationships. I've never kept solely in touch with anybody in my entire life. And again, I think that comes from traveling so much and just sort of being bounced about on the wind, so to speak. You never knew where that person had gone to, or I never knew where I was going to be next. So, what's the point of sending someone a letter and saying hi when you don't know if you're going to be anywhere for them to reply back to in those days? I mean, that was how it was done. So do I run into people? Yes. Do we hit up a conversation as though neither of us ever left the room? Yes. And that again is from being put into that situation of tightly living, working, breathing, drinking, playing, doing everything together. You build these friendships that just become like families.
Being around so much of it, how did you avoid the pitfalls of alcohol and drug abuse?
Did I say somewhere in my book that I avoided that?
Well, I got the impression you knew limits.
No, I had very broad limits, and I seem to have like an incredible stamina also. So that kind of made it easier. Did I ever end up in rehabs or anything like that? No. I had a set of guidelines that I set myself really early on in the day. And the minute I found myself not upholding those, I would stop what I was doing. And I've done that all my life. It's like if I can't, I would sort of make deals with myself. If a situation comes up where I'm not prepared to do this for this person, then I shouldn't be doing this anymore. Whether it was, whatever it was, but quite often it involved, alcohol and drugs. I mean, it was everywhere. It was completely and utterly everywhere, and it was mostly free. So what do? And we're all doing it. Doctors were doing it, for God's sake. Politicians were doing it, I mean, everybody who came backstage to visit you was doing it, so everybody did it. I mean, it was funny. I was on a podcast earlier today, and I can only remember one person. This is really sad. I can only remember one person in the 70s, 80s, 90s who didn't drink alcohol that I worked with. One person. I've worked with hundreds of people. You know what I mean? And this was the one person that stood out. And it was like a weird anomaly. It was like, oh, this guy doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't do drugs. Oh my God. And so we'd watch him. It was like, what's he going to do now? And he just did what he did, Oh, actually, there was two. There was another one who was very eccentric anyway. I mean, God forbid he should never have done anything, and luckily he didn't.
Always the crazies, yeah.
He was quite eccentric enough on his own. He didn't need anything. But the other one was quite a normal person and very polite, well-mannered, but would hang out with us and stay up late and, do various things that we were doing, but just didn't drink or do drugs, So it's interesting, I mean, you're surrounded with that ratio. It's pretty hard to sort of not be a part of it.
Look, of all of the stories that you shared, I bet there are as many or 2 or 3 times as many you decided not to throughout the book.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can you share a story that you decided to leave on the cutting room floor?
Yeah, I mean, a lot I left on the cutting room floor because I found that they invaded someone else's privacy. You know what I mean? There was, if I couldn't make a joke out of it per se and couldn't do it in good spirit, then I didn't want to tell the story. As far as stories that I haven't told, there's reasons for those things. I mean, what do you do? I mean, where do we start? There's so many hours you spend, with people. Like, I mean, Elton in his house, for example, at Christmas. I don't think I shared that in the book. And, you get an invitation. What do? Well, you're going to turn up, aren't you? I mean, you turn up out of curiosity. You turn up out of gratitude. But you really want to know what's going on, so of course you turn up, And it was just lovely. I mean, it was a traditional Christmas. He loves Christmas, so he put on a traditional Christmas. His manager was there, the band were there. His inner crew, which I was a part of at the time, were there. And, we just had a really, really nice Christmas, And what did he do? He decided that he would give everybody, not me, but everybody in his management and personal entourage, a Porsche. So that was when the 911s came out. So what he did was they had the raised numbers on the back, 911. I don't know if you remember.
I remember.
He had those made out of 24 karat gold.
That was in the book. Yeah, I remember.
Things things like that. I mean, those are the things that people do. I mean, you go to their houses, and I was always allowed in their homes because I never snooped. It wasn't my business. Someone would come back after having been away, and they'd go, "Oh my God, did you is that money still in the drawer?" I'm going, "What money? What drawer?" "Well, in the hallway, in the drawer there, the drawer next to the drawer that has the keys in it." "Yeah." "Well, there's 30 grand in there. Is it still there?" "Well, I guess it is if you left it there." "Well, what, you never opened that drawer?" "Why would I open that drawer?" "Well, it's next to the one that you're opening every day." "Well, yeah, but it's not the one I'm opening every day." So that's my mentality. If it's not mine and it's not my business, I've got no reason to go there. And I think that's why I was invited to a lot of these situations, because people felt comfortable and they felt safe, and they didn't, they knew that they didn't have to be looking over their shoulders to see if I was snooping or going through drawers or whatever, even there alone, unescorted, so to say. I wouldn't look at anything because it wasn't my business, So those are the sort of people that have these bonds with people, because they know that you're not out for anything. You're not, because you haven't done the easy things. You haven't taken the easy things. So they know that, you're trustworthy, and that to me is way more important than, making off with a souvenir sort of thing. You know what I mean? That mentality never appealed to me, never occurred to me, actually, to be honest.
I could relate to you from the perspective that I too went to a boarding school.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody else who I just met, a mother of one of the kids at the kids' school, who went to a boarding school in New Zealand, and we were sort of comparing notes. And I think the conclusion we both drew was that we still have a lot of habits from that time, because it's right at that thumbprint stage where your thumbprint's being formed, if you understand the metaphor.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like as though that stoic work ethic and also that honesty that you've got, minding your own business, keep your mind on the task, do you think in part that is from that era in your life?
Well, yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, I've spoken to my school since I left, since the book came out. They've actually got a copy of my book in the school library, which I find hilarious. But I've spoken to a couple of different people, members of their different associations that they have. And, our school was hard. It was hard. It was a Church of England school. And there were no frills. There was no extra niceties going on. We would get bread and butter before we went to bed at night. You know what I mean? That was it, bread and butter. And I mean, parents were paying a lot of money to have us there, but it was the mentality, I think, that they were teaching us that, don't fall into the frills and the, and all the accessories and stuff. Focus on what's hard. We went to chapel 10 times. We had our own chapel on the grounds. We'd go there 10 times a week, and it was hard. There were no frills. There were no frills in that school, but it does teach you how to interact with other people. It teaches you, I mean, to me, I can still tell, I can walk into a room and tell if someone went to boarding school by just looking around the room and watching people for a little bit. There's something, it teaches you how to carry yourself. It gives you a sort of confidence, whether it's a strength or not. I don't think everyone gets a strength from it, but you get a certain way of carrying yourself and you get a certain knowledge about yourself, what you can and cannot do, and I think that's really important, and I'm thankful for it. I mean, I hid the fact that I went to boarding school for a really long time because I thought people would go, "Oh, you're one of those," you know what I mean? And so, did I hide it or did I just deliberately not mention it? Deliberately not mention it, So, but I'm actually thankful for it because it's actually gotten me out of a lot of situations that I probably would have been floundering in if I had not gone to a boarding school. Because just by the things that they teach you, etiquette wise, all sorts of things. Different. It's as much a training for your inner self as it is for your outer self. That's what I found, anyway.
I tend to agree. I think it also gives you a pretty good measure of if you're being lied to, if someone's trying to manipulate you or trying to scapegoat you as well, because a lot of that goes on. You probably remember, and you get you're able to check the temperature, if you like, on a room in a situation to see who's got what at stake and who's trying to further their own claims on things. I found that, and I've only noticed that in the last decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. It's absolutely true. I mean, I still to this day, I'll sit in the corner and watch people in a room before I go and intermingle with people I don't know. I'll watch them first.
Yeah.
And the young brothers were like that as well. They were very much like that's, I mean, Angus probably still is, but they would definitely gauge a room and gauge an individual before they'd interact with them at all, So, I mean, it's something that started, I think, in boarding school and then got reinforced by them.
That's a really nice segue into the youngs because I've only got a couple of questions for you, but I've got a big one because I can't remember whose book it is. It'll kind of make the point redundant since I can't remember the source, but I did read it, which is that the Youngs have been described as resembling the mafia. Can you relate?
No, not at all. Not at all. A clan, yes, but a clan is not mafia. A clan is for the family, about the family, and putting family first. Mafia is about the business and having the family in the business. So hopefully they can trust each other. That's not the case with the Youngs. It's about family. It's about respect for family. And it's about, I think, paying back family as well, very much so. I mean, there was nothing but respect between George and Malcolm and Angus, which to me is two different, different generations, so to speak, almost, even though they're brothers of the same family. There was nothing but respect, and they would push each other and they'd push each other to the limit, but they would never do anything vengeful. They would never do anything spiteful. They would never leave a dead horse's head in each other's bed.
Yeah, I think it was a metaphor more than anything else. But another question is,
I think it's a really bad metaphor because that implies aggression and threats, and none of that's true.
George, I've heard him be described as very intimidating. Again, can you relate?
See, I found George nothing but wonderful. Could he intimidate people? He's a scrapper. I mean, the three of them would go toe to toe. Is that intimidating? Yes, that's intimidating. Did they walk around intimidating people? Hell no. No, they would only like for example, the fight at Sunbury between Deep Purple and AC/DC. There's been so many different versions of that.
Yeah.
Well, my version of that, and I happen to be right there, was that there are arguments going backwards and forwards between the camps. When I say arguments, there was like, no, we're not going to do this. Yeah, well, we're not going to do this. Yes, you're going to be. And it was really power plays between the two. But when Angus got accidentally knocked, George lost it and he just went for it and he dived in there and then the whole thing went off. So that's the difference. Is that aggression? No, that to me is fearless protection of your brother. You know what I mean? Don't mess with my family. Because up until then, everything could have been negotiated. But once that happened, it was call everything off. It's done. You know, you've messed with one of my family members. You know, so that's the difference. That's the difference. They do it for respect of each other, you know, as opposed to mafia that does it for money, drugs, whatever. You know, so I think it's a really bad comparison.
I'm not going to give away, as I said up top, I really don't want to give away too much about the detail in the book because this is a book that I want people to read, okay? But okay. You were as much a part of the Young family as anybody could be without actually being part of the clan, okay? To the point where you could be described at one point a sliding doors moment where you and Malcolm could have been together, okay? Do you feel as though that was a sliding doors moment for you though?
No. No, what I see it as is a moment when excuse the pun, you know, we're all kids, you know. I mean, Malcolm was 20, Angus was 18, and I was 16, you know, so we were kids. It was the first time it was the first time either of them had lived away from home. I've been hitchhiking around the country for a year and a half, doing God knows, I won't get into that. But being a hippie, really. So I think what it was there was a common ground, there was a vision that we all shared, and there was a goal that we all shared. And I think that they were used to having strong women around them. Their mother's an incredibly strong woman. Their sister, Margaret, was an incredibly strong woman. So they didn't see me as intimidating or threatening at all. They just saw me as a strong woman, you know, and I had their best interests at heart. I was working for them. I was living with them. And you know, I don't play games. You know, I'm very upfront. If I'm upset about something, you'll know. You know, if I think something's wonderful, you'll know. You know, so I think they appreciate that because they're very much like that as well. So, you know, I think, you know, was it a sliding doors moment? I mean, maybe some people would see it as that. I don't. I just see it as a moment in time where we're all learning from each other, you know, and because they instilled in me an incredible work ethic, you know, incredible work ethic that I still hold to this day. And again, you know, I'm incredibly grateful for that.
In your view, is Mark Evans important in the broader AC/DC canon?
Well, yeah. I mean, he was a member. I mean, he was there longer than I was there by a bit. And, you know, he was an actual member of the band. And at the time that he was employed, he fit the space that they needed filling. He could play the way he did. He wasn't overbearing. He didn't have to run to the front of the stage and compete for attention. He understood his position and he played it, you know. I mean, do these things change with individuals? You know, once people start getting famous and there's more money and there's more attention and there's more girls and there's all of this, you know, each person handles that their own way and each person has to answer to themselves for that. You know, I mean, every band has, you know, problems with individual members, you know, leaving or, you know, being asked to leave. And there's different reasons for it all, you know. I mean, Mark was incredibly young as well. Mark was 19, you know. So he was a young kid, you know, and they all found themselves in England. They all found themselves in Europe where none of them spoke any language apart from English, you know, and you know, Malcolm had this vision and he had a timeline and they pretty much stuck to it because he wouldn't have it any other way. So it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of pressure on different band members, So, I think, Mark holds a place, obviously not a huge place, or they probably would have inducted him into the Hall of Fame with them, but, they didn't do that. And I think that was out of respect to Cliff because he's been with them so long, But Mark was there in the beginning and you can't take that from him, The other guy, the other singer, I don't think he has any place whatsoever. Dave something, I think his name is.
Dave Evans.
Yep. Yeah, I don't believe he has any place whatsoever because it wasn't this band until he'd left. They were a band and they were called AC/DC, but they were not the AC/DC that took over the world. And it took the lineup that they had to do that. And Dave couldn't do that. It took Bon Scott and then it took,
Yeah, my word. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get sort of offended when Dave does that. I mean, I can understand that he was close to fame with them. You know what I mean? I can get it. Like he was in the company of greatness, so to speak, but he wasn't there. So, and he wasn't there for the battles. He wasn't there for the, he didn't go the distance. At least Mark went the distance in the beginning. You know what I mean? That to me is the difference.
He plays around here a fair bit. I just saw him at the Mansfield Tavern a few months back.
Oh, really?
DC songs. Yeah. So I think there's, I don't know whether the word's respect, but there's goodwill toward him from the fans because he was around a bit like you were far more involved, of course. But because he was a musician, I think people just like being around the AC/DC thing. So,
well, that's what it is. It's a closeness to greatness. It's not greatness itself.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to touch this person because they touched so-and-so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. It's weird, isn't it? But you're right.
Yeah, that to me is like isn't worth anything. It has no value to me.
I'm with you. I stand.
You've got to make it on your own merits. You can't make it on where you almost were once.
You make a couple of one very astute observation about Phil in the book. I think from the sounds of things, you were one of the few people that could foresee what was going to happen decades later, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, were you close to Phil at all?
I liked Phil. Phil and I got on quite well, and he actually sent a message to me not so long ago through a mutual friend of ours, which I thought was really quite sweet. But, again, I mean, to me, Phil is the drummer for AC/DC, and that's just my personal opinion. I think deep down it's Angus's opinion as well, and it's probably, the rest of the band's opinion as well. They just need to find a way to figure it out, to make it work again, And you have problems, you have struggles. Did he go completely off the wall? Yes, he did. But everyone handles things differently. Everyone handles success differently. Everyone handles failure differently, and he had to handle both. He had success. I mean, Malcolm struggled, with success. He struggled with alcohol, but he got over it and he got it under control. Phil just had a much harder time trying to do that. And I think that's because he didn't have the family support that Malcolm had to get him through it. I really believe that there wasn't that infrastructure that would make him listen and help him through it.
Did you get to say goodbye to Mel?
No, I got to see him in, what was it, 2000? I don't know, it's in the book. When they were doing that, putting the hands in the walk.
You got the guitar. Yeah, you bought the guitar. Well, you got.
Yeah. With Angus asked me to get that, and then I spent like 2 or 3 days with them, because they had that going one day, then they had two shows, and they had a day off in between, and so we went out to dinner and we did a bunch of different stuff, and so I got to spend time with them. Did I know it was goodbye? No, but when I last saw Bon for the last time, I didn't know that was goodbye either. And that's, to me, is better. What are you going to do? You look someone in the eye and know it's the last time you're going to see them because they're going to die. That's why we don't know when we're going to die, because it would be too hard to handle. You know?
Did Jesse Fink reach out to you? You know, the Bon Scott, The Last Days of Bon Scott. He did that. I thought it was an excellent book, by the way.
No,
Did you read that at all?
no.
Check it out. I think it's worthwhile.
It's called The Last Days of Bon Scott.
Yeah, he tries to unpick. I know I've asked you a bunch of questions about AC/DC, but I'm not the world's biggest AC/DC fan, given I grew up listening to heavy metal and death and black metal and all the rest of it. That's only a thing for my interest in AC/DC, I must confess. So I don't have the history of reading a lot of the interviews and the like. So I wasn't aware of there being conjecture about how Bon died, but apparently there is about his whereabouts. And Jesse Fink has written, certainly it's investigative journalism and put into a book. But after I read your book, I thought, I wonder if he reached out to you, and clearly he hasn't. But I really encourage you to read that book, if it's not too difficult, of course. I know Bon was your mate.
Right. Yeah, maybe. I've heard different versions of what he's written and different versions of what different people think of him. So I never kind of went out of my way to read the book, but maybe it's worth a read, yeah.
I'd say it's worth it. He seems like a decent enough fella. I think, the role that people like, include myself into this, we just try to get to the bottom of things. And it can be clumsy at times. It can be difficult. Sometimes you accidentally make people cry. It's not because we're trying to do that. It's just trying to get to the bottom of things, because these people, we don't know them. You did, but they're important to us.
Right. No, I get it. Totally.
Yeah. The Angels, Australian Crawl, I could go on, but I won't. Daddy Cool and Mondo Rock. That grand era, maybe not Daddy Cool, it's a bit before this era, but 1977 to 1983. Look, I've come to a conclusion that it's about the most vibrant rock scene that ever existed, patriotism aside. Do you agree?
From a distance, I agree, yeah, because I was already gone. I was already living in England, so what I would see is bands like Lobby Lloyd and stuff would come over to England and do shows over there. So we'd catch up and do that sort of stuff, So, I didn't grow up with a lot of those bands, they weren't on my radar. I mean, I went back to Australia for a handful of years in the mid to late 80s. So I caught up with all these bands, you know what I mean? So, and like you say, whether it's Mondo Rock or whoever, they were there before anyway, and you find different members of different bands were in other bands before, and so them from that, so it was an interesting time. I mean, there was some great, amazing music's come out of Australia. And the problem is, it was just unfortunately bad timing for some of those bands, because the world wasn't ready to receive international music like it is now. I mean, can you imagine how those bands would have hit with the internet? God, amazing. It would have been a whole different story.
Yeah, it's huge. A lot of those bands, they became huge, and you're no doubt aware of this. Brazil is a huge market for Australian Crawl, and these Aussie surf bands that have got it's surf adjacent, I call them.
Surf adjacent.
Country to the surf culture.
Next door.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
that's funny. Yeah, Brazil's an interesting country for music tastes, actually. I mean, that's why they had the Rock in Rio. I mean, it was one of the first big festivals to ever, go out of America. And it was because the fan base is so huge there. I mean, they love music, and they like it hard and they like it loud,
They remind me, my godson, his father is, I suppose you call him Afro-Brazilian or what have you, but they're so similar to us, minus the bloody language. That's what I've found. We just get into the same things and can party when we want to. We know how to turn it on, the Brazilians and the Aussies. I know that from experience.
I think Brazilians look better when they take their clothes off, though, don't they? With their, their little festival dances they have, and the girls are just wearing very little.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's a lot. I haven't been there. It's a country that I'll definitely visit.
There you go.
Before my time expires, there you go. But the best band that never made it, who is it?
Oh, Jesus. The best band that never made it. Oh, God.
Stumped you.
I tell you. There were so many bands, like between tours. I mean, it's hard when you're touring constantly because you're seeing what you're seeing, and then you're only seeing other bands that are making it as well because that's where your friends are. So they give you passes, so you go to those shows. I mean, I got into the whole ska thing over in the UK when I was there. And there were some great bands that came out of that, and they were just destined to never make it to any sizable following. They were respectable, and people knew of them, whether it was 38 Special or, whoever it was. But it was like, but they were, they're never going to get any bigger than that, and that to me is a shame, because the music's great, it's fun music, it's good time music, it's great music. So, I would say, that the genre of music, let me do a genre at least, if I can't do an actual band, it is probably that. It's reggae, it's edging on reggae, it's ska, it's fun, it's good music, and it just never really broke.
Oh, it's interesting. We both went to the same spot there. I was thinking, a better question would have been, what was the best scene that didn't really sort of break out? And you've answered it that
right.
way. Love it. That's right. Yeah. What about though? There are tons of bands that became not so much huge, but gained critical acclaim, and you thought, really, that band? What's your view on that? Which band is the most overrated?
Oh God, there's so many.
Yeah, I know. I know, it's shocking, isn't it?
God. I mean, I've got to say the 80s were a bit horrific for me. There was all that hair. There was all that hair and makeup and glam stuff. And I just couldn't get my head around any of it. I couldn't. I mean, it even filtered across to Aussie at one point. I mean, it's like, stop it. Stop it. It's contagious, I mean, Whitesnake was a decent band until they moved to the States, and then they became this glam band. Glam is, again, I don't get it. I'll never get it. I don't understand. I'm totally confused, and don't help me because I don't want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the biggest shock to me, was that. It's like, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah, as long as you had a guitarist that could play a mile a moment, do scales quickly, and had the huge hair, all of a sudden you were signed to some indie that was acting as a major, hoping that a major would pick you up. And there was, I've done the thing where you go onto the YouTube deep dives. Even before that, I go and buy the CDs for $5 in the 90s, because that's all they were. And you put it on. You'd heard about this band, and it was garbage. You're right. You'd go, there's nothing here. But I tend to find, and feel free to disagree, a lot of bands, when they have a long career, there's a reason for that. It's because they're quality. Okay. And that's the difference between bands that are hyped up. And I'll throw a few bands under the bus now, like the Jets or the Vines of the world. Okay. Because they were hyped. It wasn't a very short runway, and then they get up and then bang, they crash straight away. And you can see that a mile away.
Yeah, you've got to be able to follow through. That's the whole thing. I mean, you've got to be able to follow through. And again, and that's about pacing yourself, and it's about actually having, a stockpile of material before you record your first album. You can't just go into a studio and throw together a bunch of songs and go, okay, that'll do, and then go out and tour it. And then all of a sudden, 12 months into touring that, it's like, okay, we need another album. Well, no one's had time to write anything. No one's knows anything else to play. They've just been playing that one set for, since they've been on a stage, basically. So it's very, very difficult. I mean, these shows, whether it's The Voice or whether it's America's Got Talent or whether it's whatever it is, it's just, I just find it terrible. I mean, they get some of these people, I mean, they sound okay for a song, but are you seriously going to listen to 2 hours of that? You know what I mean? It's like you're talking, you have to go out and entertain an audience for 2 hours. Yes. That's what you've got to work for. If you end up only being able to do an hour and a half, well, I guess that's okay. But, you should shoot for at least 2 hours, because that's what they're paying for, And if you don't have a stockpile of material and you don't have the talent to create that material on the fly, and you can't actually put it together because you're not that good a musician in the back of a bus while you're touring down the road going to the next show, then you've got problems. You've got problems. And this, I call it prefab manufactured music, and it's like, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble here, but I'm going to jump straight to this Beatles track that's come out.
Mm.
Now, I listened to it once last night, and only because everyone was going on so much about it. I don't think it sounds like Lennon at all. I don't know. I don't think it sounds like him. Bits of it maybe, but not much of it. And I think it's an average song. I don't see I don't understand. I don't understand the point of it. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever why McCartney would do that. I don't get it. Do you get it?
No, I don't. No, I'm not with you. I thought it must have been. I thought actually there's a ton of this stuff out there these days. The two bands in particular get picked on, the Beatles and Metallica, AI-generated music. So create a song that sounds like a Metallica song or a Beatles song. No word of a lie, I thought that's what it was. I thought someone had done a very good job making an AI song sound like a Beatles song. But
that's what it is.
Oh, it's an AI song, is it?
Well, basically, I mean, they've used some, I don't know how much, but what they're saying is that they're using some of his phrases and, the demo track, so to speak, of whatever the track was.
Oh, I thought it was a demo that they'd polished. Oh, yeah, I didn't know it was a bloody AI. No, it can go to the bin then if it's AI.
Well, how are they going to polish it? He's not here to polish it.
Oh, if you've got the demo though, you've got the raw audio which you can separate.
Yeah, but I don't think it was like a full song. You know what I mean? It wasn't. I don't think it was a completed song, and so there are points there where it's his voice, but I don't believe it's all his voice, and I don't think it even sounds like his voice, to be honest. But I mean, there's phrasing there and stuff that sounds like him, but to me, there's so much that doesn't. So it just confused me, and I guess the most polite thing I can say about it is. It confused me.
Yeah, but Tana, that's a huge problem then, because there would be a ton of demos lying around in Paul's vault that are just him maybe just mumbling something.
Right.
Effectively, they can create an entire song from that, and that's wrong as far as I mean. He's not here to disagree with that. That's the issue.
Well, that's the point, exactly. But that's the same as these shows that they're doing with holograms. I mean, they did a Ronnie Dio one, I mean, I don't think Ronnie would have agreed to that.
I don't know.
I really don't. I don't think he would have. Wendy obviously does because she gets money out of it, I mean, that's all that she was ever about, since he's died, especially. But, she's just flogging him, and I just find it really in poor taste. I mean, it's going to be horrific when Ozzy goes. God knows what Sharon's going to get up to. Jesus Christ, God help us.
Well, I'm glad I'm with you. I know she's the one person I would. There's a couple of people I'd point blank refuse to chat with, interview, or what have you. She's one of them. And look, I don't know Bob, but I've had a number of conversations with Bob Daisley back in the day,
right.
20 years ago. Lovely fella, you know him. He's a sweetheart of a guy.
Absolutely. Well, I was on that tour.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I mean, you got a front row seat to what the hell was going on there as well.
Yeah. It was tough, I mean, it was a tough tour all round because I just come back from Australia and I came back specifically. They wanted me to do this tour, so I came back and jumped straight into it, not realizing what the hell I was jumping into. I mean, we had an incredible crew. The sound crew were amazing, just two of my best mates. So that was like, yeah, I'll do it. You know what I mean? It was like, who's on the crew? And Davey Kirkwood and Gunji. And it's like, okay, I'm in, because they were just two of the most brilliant. They did all of the heavy metal bands. They did all of the, that loud, anything loud and substantial. Those were the guys behind it, So it's like, yeah, I'll do it. But it was just a farce, I mean, they didn't give us an itinerary. We didn't have an itinerary for that tour because I think they knew if they showed us the schedule, how there were no days off and how long it was going to go for, that we would have all run away. and then, we were having problems getting paid. We were having all sorts of things. I mean, it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare. But the music was pretty damn incredible. It was pretty incredible. It really was. It was like damn, Randy was amazing. Bob's like a powerhouse, and it's like, he had a great rhythm section, and Ozzy, I mean, once I got used to, I spent the first probably week of the tour expecting him to fall off the front of the stage. And once I realized that that's just how he walks like a toddler.
Yeah, I love that bit in the book.
And it's
so
like,
true.
oh my God, what's he doing? And it's like, is he all right? And I'm out at the front of the lighting console going, well, I'm not going to make it there to catch him. My God, I hope someone catches him when he goes off. And it was like, and I didn't realize that that's just him, and he'd been like that forever.
Was his alcohol consumption, it's legendary, but was it as full on as what it's been written about? In other words, was he just permanently pissed or stoned?
Yeah, well, he was, I mean, this tour was to hopefully get him out of that. So Sharon had a pretty tight leash on him. She was trying her hardest to keep him, sort of under control a bit, but he'd sneak out and come and play with us because we were fun and we weren't yelling at him all the time. So we'd always be running around, and the hotels they gave us were just horrible. Oh my God, that was so cheap. They didn't have any room service. They didn't have restaurants. They didn't, like they were the ones where they set up a little room and you'd have breakfast in the morning and that was it. So we'd go in and we'd raid the fridges and we'd do all sorts of things, and we couldn't find a bar anywhere, and we'd try and find a stash of the owner's alcohol or whatever, just getting into trouble, because we were bored. It was like, and we didn't have any money because we weren't getting paid. So it was like, we're a pack of like vagabonds and thieves ransacking hotels. No wonder they didn't want us in their hotels.
Yeah. Were you and Lee, Kerslake, were you guys mates?
Yeah, Lee was a sweet guy. He was, I mean, I wasn't real close with him, but he's a very pleasant guy and very easy to talk to and stuff, so he was easy to get on with, and Bob, Bob's so easy to get on with, and Randy was sweet. He's quite shy, he was quite an introvert really, and God forbid trying to be a vegetarian on that tour. God help you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I don't know how he did it. He had his little girlfriend with him the whole time, so just the two of them would come in and they'd really quiet and they'd sort of wander off again, So it was interesting, the dynamic was interesting, definitely.
Did you see things sort of unravel between the band though? Like, I understand that nobody was getting paid, but when it finally clicked that Sharon was running the show and it was, forget about band names and self-determination from Ozzy's perspective, but you saw it all unravel, surely.
Well, I mean, we felt it. You felt the discontent, and it's like, well, what's going on? And it's like, well, maybe it's because, there's a problem with money. Maybe it's because, I don't know. I mean, they kept firing lighting people, so my hands were full the whole time trying to redo everything every time someone would turn up. And, and it was like running a crew and doing 2-3 different jobs because there was no budget on the tour, because, she's amazing at getting, caviar on a beer budget. I don't know how she does it, but she does it. And, of course, we end up being the ones on the beer budget. Whereas working hard and getting, all we're getting is the empty cans, But there was tension, and you could tell there was things. I mean, I wasn't privy at the time that it was meant to be, the whole band as one, because it came, the first press we saw was Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz, so it was like, oh, well, that's what it is. I guess it's Ozzy and Sharon was so adamant with that as well, that as a crew, that's what we heard, Was the band disgruntled? Yes. Did we know why? No. Was it our place to ask? Not really. You know what I mean? So, you don't go up to a band member and ask them why they're upset. It's like telling someone to calm down. You don't do it. It doesn't work. And there's boundaries that you have to respect as a crew person, I mean, they're your employer, they are your employer. So you need to respect that. A lot of people forget that line gets blurred, and they're going, oh yeah, but we were hanging out last night till 3 a.m. and he's my mate now, yeah, and I'll do it again tomorrow. And it's like, I don't want to hear that. You're 2 hours late for your call. yeah, but I was with the band, man. And it's like, no, that's not why you're here. You're not here to play with the band. You're here to do a job. And if you can't do your job, then you need to go home. I mean, I had that instance on Elton, that I had a crew member that decided that it was much more fun to stay up all night with Elton, because Elton has like outrageous parties. I mean, oh my God, I never went to any of them because I know better. It's like, oh, hell no. No, I'm not going anywhere near that. So I always stayed well away. But, it got to the point where he came in late for his call and then he was useless. He couldn't do anything because he was still drunk, and it's like, right, that's once. And it happened again. And so I gave him a warning. I said, this happens again and you're going home. And then the tour manager comes to me, of course, and says, you can't send him home. And it's like, why not? And it's like, well, because, he was just hanging with Elton and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, then great. Then Elton can pay him and I'll get another crew member to take his place and he can play with Elton as long as he wants. Well, all of a sudden the guy's getting sent home because he wasn't that entertaining, I guess. You know what I mean? I didn't want him on the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like a match that gets struck and burns out. Yeah.
Well, it's not why he was there. He wasn't hand chosen to entertain anyone, and he was just got caught up in it for a little bit too long. But that's how it is. I mean, it happens, and I say to people that people ask about behaviour. How crews behave, and what they're doing, and all that sort of thing. And I always say it filters down from the top. If it's not happening at the top, it's not going to happen at the bottom because it won't be tolerated. But if it's happening at the top, then all's fair. You know what I mean? Everyone's going for it, and because a lot of times people have gone, oh, this and this happened and, oh, the band would never stand for that. And it's like, well, actually, I hate to be the one to tell you, but, so, there's different behaviours that are tolerated. And is it any different now? It's a little bit different now, but it's only because it's become such a huge billion-dollar industry that they keep a tighter rein on things,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And at the other end of it, like I had a chat to a fellow this morning that was driving from Boston to Denver. 4 people stacked in a van. It feels like part of it's gone full circle where a band's completely they're on a label like Nuclear Blast or what have you, but they're self-managed, which means that they've got all of the merch in the van as well. Yeah, so it feels like as though you could probably relate to a lot of what they're doing from your time when you were starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They've still got to start. These bands still have to start somewhere. They really do, and it's getting harder for them because the smaller venues, a lot of them have been bought up or a lot of them are closing, and it's tough, so my heart goes out to them. I mean, I saw a documentary where there was this young girl and she was the tour manager / merch person and something else, some other job she had as well. And they do that a lot now with these small bands. All of a sudden they've got like 4 different titles. You know what I mean? They're the tour accountant, they're the tour manager, they're the merchandising person and whatever else on the driver between shows, So, I mean, we did that anyway. We all used to do that anyway. Only, there was rarely merchandise very early on. But we just didn't have titles for it, so no one knew how much we were really doing. Yeah. Sounds more when you say you're doing 4 jobs and you've got a title for each one, as opposed to just saying you're doing everything. People tend to not believe you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, look, something else I found fascinating was you were there for the birth of Lollapalooza, so the so-called alternative revolution.
Yeah.
Back in 1991 and 1992, and those stories you have about Ice-T and Ice Cube and Body Count, they're fascinating. I'm sure you left quite a bit out on those ones, but what your memories of? Do you have any memories of working with Henry Rollins in 1991?
Yeah, I did a lot with Henry. He was a client of mine for a long time. I did everything from, I did everything from moving his equipment around the world to moving his books around the world, because he's, published author and stuff. And, he's an interesting character. He really is a character. His spoken word stuff's amazing. I love his spoken word stuff. It's hilarious. Have you heard the one about coming to Australia? Have you heard that?
I think there's a few out there, to be honest. So I'll say, tell me the story, and I'll see if it jogs a memory. Yeah.
Oh no, this is his spoken word. He does these spoken word things occasionally. He's done ones about going to England, going to Glastonbury or Reading and all that sort of stuff. Does ones about going to Australia. And he talks about because he's very serious and stern a lot. You know what I mean? So he talks in this voice, and he's like, yeah, I just got off the road. I'm never ever going back out on the road again. It's like it's hell out there, and there's never any money, and there's nothing, and you're dirty, and you don't get to shower, and you're doing shows and shows and shows. And I'm never going out there again. And then you hear bring, bring, phone ringing. Picks it up. Yes, yes, this is Henry. What? England? Glastonbury, I'll be there.
Yeah.
It's like, and then the story continues. You've got to, if you can find his set of tapes they were CDs when they came out. Not CDs. They were actually, I got them on tape, on cassette tape. I don't know if they made it onto CDs or not, but they were hilarious. He did this whole series and a series about Australia as well, which was so funny, so funny. But he's a unique character, I mean, he was there at the head of the whole punk thing, I mean, he got into that. He was like with the aggressive side of the LA punk scene, when it started getting aggressive, I mean, what I liked about the punk scene was it was inclusive. You could be a girl and they didn't care. They really didn't care. I mean, the punk era probably had more female artists and instrument players than any other genre. You know what I mean? Per ratio, per capita, and it's like, and so that's what I liked about it. But I was working with bands like Status Quo and The Who and stuff like that. So I'd have to sneak off on days off and go to the punk clubs and stuff, and they go to me, what are you doing? And I'm going, they were my age, I was still younger than everyone, everyone I toured with up until the end of the 80s, early 90s were at least 10 years older than me. You know what I mean? And it was like, so I just needed I needed a tribe that was my age that I could relate to, But anyway, getting back to Henry, it's like I went to his house one day to pick up, boxes and boxes of this book that he just had published. And I walk in and there's no furniture in the house. And it's like, oh, I like your house, Henry. It's nice. He's like, yeah. And it's like, so did you just move in? What? No, I've been here years. I'm trying to make polite conversation. And it's like he's got like a workout gym area and that was it. That's all. I mean, obviously I didn't go into bedrooms or anything like that, but it was like that was it. There was a gym in the corner and that was his furniture. And in the other corner was like wall-to-ceiling boxes of books, So it's like, well, I'll just get the books and go then, shall I? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, bye.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So... But, he's a very interesting character, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. I don't feel, to your point, I love it when he snaps into comedic routine. He's become very serious, though. And he sort of lost a bit of that spark, that comedic stuff. My wife and I, we'd go to see him every time he came to Australia, and we'd just laugh our heads off at some of the comments he's about,
funny.
Yeah, talking about the clothes that they make that they sell at Walmart and shit, super action hero. It's about the time of the Iraq War and stuff, and it's got some fucking idiot with, a machine gun on it. And,
right.
With the sleeves are as big as sleeping bags, and it's like, who buys this shit? It is intimidable. You can't mimic his delivery, but it's all about timing comedy, and he's just got it down pat.
Oh, he absolutely has it. I mean, he should have made a second career out of that, I thought. Or a longer term.
I don't know why he didn't. I don't know why he didn't. He would have been great at stand-up. Would have been fabulous.
I think it's a matter of focusing with him. He writes a book and then he'll do stand-up, then he'll go back on the road and then he'll do this. And I think it's a bit of a moving target theory with him, I
think you're right. And you'd know. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Another character, bloke when I say I love, I just, his aura, I've had one conversation with him, which I cherish, but Al Jorgensen.
God, Al.
Yeah. What are your memories?
Lollapalooza and Al. The comment was, Tana. So this was the night before the opening night of Lollapalooza that Al was on. So Tana, can you do me a huge favor? Oh, okay, what? This is the head guy at Lollapalooza. He's gone, I want you to babysit someone for me because he's got to make it to the first show. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He says, I'll take you up to the hotel room, introduce you. He's a nice guy. You guys will get on well. He says, but you just got to keep him in that hotel room. Don't let him leave the hotel room, whatever you do. I'm like, what? Why me? Which was never answered. Hello, as we're marching down the hotel corridors, and there's a knock on the door opens, and he's like, Al, this is Tana. Tana's going to hang with you guys. Okay, yeah. Pushes me in, shuts the door and leaves. I'm like, what? So this was me babysitting Al, trying to make sure he didn't OD before the first show, basically. Yeah. If you want to be brutally honest about it. And it was just, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it, but it was so eye-opening for me. For someone who's seen everything from Led Zeppelin's camp when they were at their darkest time to, I'd never seen anything like it. It was like, oh, my God, So I learned a lot that night. Did he get away from me? He did. Around about 4:30 in the morning, he slipped out on me. I thought it was safe, but it wasn't. But he did come back. Well, we sent people out and found him. So he left a trail of breadcrumbs, basically, so I could figure out exactly where he'd gone from piecing the night back together again. So we did get him back. We did get him on stage, and he did make it through the tour. But that's how concerned they were at the beginning. They had someone babysit him to make sure he made it to the first show.
I don't know how he hasn't lost his mind.
I don't know either. It's like, but he was yet again another interesting character. Quite intelligent. He's an intelligent guy.
Very intelligent. I had a great conversation with him. Yeah.
Yeah. So many people get. Judge it. I guess it's the whole judge a book by its cover type thing. It's the same thing with road crew. Road crew were always misjudged. Oh, they're dirty, they're sweaty, they're animals. They don't bathe. They're this, they're that. And how can they be anything but just big gorillas? And those big gorillas that didn't bathe, the reason why we didn't bathe is because we had to get to the next show. It wasn't by choice that we weren't bathing. We were told that we'd arrive at a show, set it up, do the show, break it down, put it in the truck and drive from Melbourne to Sydney to do the next show. That's that very next morning. Sorry, we didn't have time to have a shower. And in those days, venues didn't have showers or anything like that. So it's not as though you could shower at the venue. There were no tour buses, so you couldn't shower on a tour bus. And you probably wouldn't see a hotel for 3 or 4 nights. It was a nightmare, but those people were the ones that designed this industry on their backs. You know what I mean? They built this industry up on their backs. They created what it took to get all these trusses up in the air, what it took to get these PAs up in the air, what it took to have the space for like special effects and pyrotechnics and all that sort of stuff, were those smelly roadie types, which I'm proud to be one, because they're an incredible group of people, and to this day, there's still some of the original people out there, and the younger ones that have come along now, they look up to different ones of us, and just they're in awe, and I think it's deserved, it's respect, so it's good to see that they're getting their, they're getting their hurrahs, because they should,
You were there from the very beginning. Are you asked to act as a sounding board by these more astute management types who get that what needs to be done?
Not so much management companies. No. You tend to spend a lot of time. I do a little bit of mentorship work, for different organisations. I do college speaking for different colleges. I'll go in and speak to students like that. I did something at USC not so long ago. And, which is always nice. I've done a couple of colleges in the UK, all through Europe. I've done a few other ones. And, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy speaking about it. I enjoy speaking about it as a profession, as a trade, and also, showing the pitfalls, but also showing the high points as well. I think it's important that people go in with their eyes wide open. Management companies don't have the power they used to have now. Promoters have that power.
Mm-hmm.
The be all and end all is with the promoter now, with companies like AEG and Live Nation. They've taken over everything.
Yeah,
we saw it coming. We saw it coming, and no one did anything about it. What do you do?
Except for Sharon, apparently. And maybe Wendy. There you go. So, talking about another fierce lady, Courtney Love, have you had a lot to do with her over the years?
No, I haven't. I met her once actually backstage at Lollapalooza, and she was quite hilarious. Actually, she took a shine to me.
Yeah.
Not sure why. I seem to have this effect on certain artists. But so we had a couple of cigarettes together, and that was about it, really. But I always thought it was a shame, actually, because I thought she was quite talented. I liked her music. I just think she was her own worst enemy, And there's so many artists that fall into that category, whether it's Amy Winehouse,
Oh God, she needed you,
whether it's it's funny, because I see these performers going through this course, and I see them going to this downhill spiral, and I say to myself, God, I wish I could be there to help them. Yeah. I don't think that I'm a be all end all solution to anything, but God, I would have given it a damn good shot, and they would not have had a yes man. You know what I mean? They would have had someone who told them, which means I probably would have got fired pretty quickly anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
But I think
it's sad, yeah.
I did. I agree with you. That's my point. I don't use the word tragic very often because it's not deserved, but Amy's was tragic because she was an incredibly talented young lady who just seemed to be fed. Okay, she developed a habit, and then it seemed to be available to her 24/7, and within 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it was, gone.
Yeah, 3. Yeah,
like what Neil said, mate. Excuse the term, but junkie's like a setting sun.
Yeah,
it's so true.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard, I mean, it's really difficult now, and I mean, the thing now is because it's such a mega industry, a lot of this gets pushed under the carpet now. It's not spoken about, it's denied. Oh no, these people don't do drugs. You get out on the road, and sure enough, it's all going on like it was. But no one's admitting to it because then it's an insurance issue.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. It's money, so no one admits to anything. They just brush it under the carpet. So, people are still dying, people are still ODing, but everyone's just pretending everything's all right. Nothing to see here, move on. Well, there's a lot to see, actually. It's not good.
Yes. Yeah. Are there any other artists that you would have loved to have worked with that you didn't have the opportunity to?
There was a time where I really wanted to go out on a Clapton tour, but I was kind of glad I didn't because it was the one that failed. And he was having all sorts of terrible problems anyway, so that was a bit of a shame. There's a lot of tours I would have liked to have done, but it's just my priorities went to I've chosen this as a career. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work as much as I can, and I'm going to work with the best people that I know so I can learn as much as I can, So quite often, like, for example, the first Aussie tour, the Blizzard of Oz tour, I could have been, working with other people instead of Aussie. And I didn't go on the tour for Aussie. I went on the tour because there were crew people who were really, really good on that, on that tour. So that's usually, from a crew person's point of view, that's usually a heads up that there's something going on here that's worth seeing. You know what I mean? If these good people are coming on board and it's not a huge tour, why are they wasting their time? Yeah. You know what I mean? Why are they giving their time to this? So I would tend to do that. I would follow decent, good crew people, what's coming up next? Well, we've got an Elton thing. I mean, for example, I did Quo for 4 years, Status Quo. And I did them for 4 years because I'd helped build the lighting system. So I knew the lighting system. And then when they stopped touring, I took the lighting system and went to a production company and did all these other bands with that rig, which was still Quo's rig, and they were getting paid for it. And I was getting paid for it, but it gave me all these other bands to work with to get different perspectives on, how different people are doing shows, what's new, what's going on, So, and to me, it was volume. I would go for the volume of like as much work as I could and as frequently as I could, whereas some people would just stay back on a retainer and work for just one band, and that was never my mentality because I get bored. I can't sit still that long. You know what I mean? I can't sit still. So I've got to keep moving, and I want to know what's out there. I want to know what's out there. I want to know what it is. I want to know what's different, and I want to see all different sorts of music, So, whether it's, the Police or whether it's, Pearl Jam or, Kravitz, doesn't matter, Luther Vandross. I mean, all of these bands had something that attracted me to wanting to work with them, and it was usually a different reason for each one, I mean, bands like Jane's Addiction, I love that vibe, I mean, it's down and it's dirty, and I like it, Luther Vandross, not my sort of music at all, but the production was something else, it was incredibly professional. It was over the top for the time. And it was great, and good people working on that tour. He always had good people and he always had good musicians, So those were the sort of things that I always looked for,
I'll make this my final question for you then, and I've saved this one for you because out of anybody that I've asked this question of, and there's not many, but I've always picked my mark with this one, I reckon you can answer it better than anyone. Is rock and roll dead?
No, I don't think it'll ever die. It may lose some of its sheen and some of its perspective, but I don't think, I mean, what are we calling rock and roll? Are we calling Chuck Berry? Are we calling the Rolling Stones? Are we calling Soundgarden? What are we calling rock and roll?
I think that's the question, actually, and I'm really glad you bring it up. So for my the way that I look at it, everything from Chuck Berry right up to the fiercest black metal. If you're using guitar, bass, drums, and you've got someone standing out the front, hey, baby, it's all rock and roll. So that's what I mean by that. So it's just to add to it, when I say, is it dead, is it niche? There you go. A better way of asking the question is it like jazz? Has it become niche? Or will it, as it stays as a mainstream art form, are they over?
I think it'll stay mainstream because, like we've both just said, it keeps evolving, and it's always been at the front of every evolution, whether it's you want to call it grunge or do you want to call it rock, I mean, what is that? I mean, Pearl Jam's, is that, yes, they're a grunge band because they came out of Seattle and they wore flannel. Do they play rock music? Do you think they play rock music?
Oh, absolutely. I call it, whether you call it grunge or what, it's still rock and roll to me, yeah.
Well, right. So I think, but what I think is going to keep it at the forefront is it will just keep doing that. It'll keep morphing. It went from, it became grunge. What is it now? Then there was industrial. I mean, industrial, black metal. What are these? Are they rock? Is metal rock? Well, Aussie's metal, right? Is Aussie metal? Iron Maiden, are they metal?
I don't know anymore. I've got to say.
I don't know because, I mean, originally they were metal bands, right? But now they're kind of rock bands.
Just rock. Yeah.
I mean, Metallica is a rock band.
Definitely rock, not metal. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a rock band, So I think it's really... sorry,
You're right.
It's my dog outside saying he's crying, going.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So no, I don't think it'll die. I think it'll just keep morphing into whatever's the flavour of the decade.
Yeah, I think I hope you're right. I don't have the answer, which is it's a genuine question. I hope it continues to evolve. I've got daughters aged 8 and 10, and And between them and their friends and their extended network, rock just doesn't come into it. That's my only concern, is that it's all this J-pop and K-pop stuff. I don't care about that stuff. That stuff can evolve and be as successful as it needs to be. But rock and roll is so vibrant, you know.
It'll come back, like the Rolling Stones. It'll come back.
Awesome. Well, I'll let you go and feed the pup there, right? I really appreciate you giving me so much of your time here, Tana. I love the book again.
That's great. Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for thinking of me.
Well, there you have it. Tana Douglas. I encourage you again to check out her book. It is a fantastic read. All right, go across to scarsandguitars.com if you're interested in many more conversations with luminaries and important people from the world of hard rock, heavy and extreme metal. And not just that, I've developed a bit of a reputation for having conversations with the members of Cradle of Filth, so there is a dedicated link in the website to checking out all of those chats. I assure you it is well worth your time. All right, that's it from me. Check out my book too. There's a link in the banner on the website on the homepage. If you buy it, hit me up because I want to thank you in person as well. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast series. Until next time, it's a very goodbye for now.
This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
You know, if you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, you know, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, you know, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
You know, my name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.